Back in 2007, I photographed a football game in Buffalo, New York. It was late December and the weather started out not too bad at around 50 degrees. What could possibly go wrong? This is From the Vault. Hey, thanks for coming back. I'm David Bergman. You probably know by now, I've been a professional photographer for 30 years, mostly working in music and sports. I'm pulling some of my more well-known and lesser-known images out of my archive each week on this show and telling the behind-the-scenes story. Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button down below. Also use the little bell icon. You'll be the first to be notified as soon as new shows come out with new stories each week. To support this show, I'm also offering signed fine art prints of some of the images I talk about. I hope you'll check those out at davidbergmanphoto.com. All right, let's go back to December 23rd, 2007. I was working for Sports Illustrated magazine. I was covering the New York Giants at the Buffalo Bills. Sidebar story, Bills player Kevin Everett had been injured about 3.5 months earlier. He had a neck injury. It was actually considered to be life-threatening. They didn't think he'd ever walk again if he survived. And he made some amazing improvements over that short period of time. And what happened was he actually came to speak to his teammates, and he walked into the locker room on his own power at that game to give an inspirational speech before that game. I photographed him as he arrived in the tunnel there. There were a lot of photographers. It was kind of hard to get position in there, but I just had to get something of him arriving. Was not allowed into the locker room, but he did walk into that locker room on his own power. So that was kind of a cool story to cover. Once the game started, it was relatively normal weather. It was around 50 degrees and overcast, which by Buffalo standards in late December is downright balmy. I mean, that's basically beautiful. If it's 50 and overcast in Buffalo in December, consider yourself quite lucky. And so I was all happy about that until the rains started to come. I always say photographically, if it's going to rain, then give me rain. Give me a downpour, right? Because light rain is just annoying and you still have to protect your gear and try to stay dry. But that rain doesn't even show in the pictures if it's just really light. Heavy rain is going to make better photographs. So if I have to pay the price of dealing with the weather, then at least give me the payoff of having something in the pictures, right? The thing is, I need to be careful what I wish for. I've always said that, but then as the rain started to get heavier and heavier, pretty quickly, we had this nasty, heavy pelting rain with 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts. It was bad. It was some of the hardest rain I've ever had to deal with. Trying to keep your gear dry, the photo gear dry, is not really that easy to do. There are some great systems like from Think Tank Photo who make these rain covers. I was at the time very stubborn about it, and I had my go-to system for covering the gear, and it was literally hefty bags. If it was a day where rain was predicted, from the airport and between the airport and the stadium, I would have the assistants stop with me at a place to buy garbage bags, and I would get a box of hefty bags, and I had this whole system, this elaborate system of cutting and taping where I could actually cover all my gear, and it was sort of a fitted, really nice custom setup. I don't know if really nice, but custom setup to cover all my gear, and it worked pretty well in most situations. The thing is, this was not most situations. It was very heavy rain. I don't think any rain cover would have really helped in this particular situation. My assistant, my local assistant in Buffalo, Chris Phillips, he did his best to try to help me manage those long lenses. I was using the 600 f4 and the 400 f2.8 lens, those two big monster lenses, and we're switching back and forth, and it was really not easy to keep those covered at all. But, you do the best you can. I also had two short lenses, probably the 7200 and either the 16-35 or the 2470, depending on what I was using at the time. But it was so bad, even in Buffalo, where they're used to dealing with bad weather, they had put on the sidelines, I don't know if these are sandbags or what's in those bags, but they had put something along the base of the stands there to keep the water probably from flooding down the stands onto the sidelines. So even in a place like Buffalo where they're used to dealing with, the airport doesn't shut down unless it's really, really bad. So they're used to dealing with it, but they still had to do some extra protection for the game. Now, as far as the game itself, Eli Manning, the Giants quarterback, also had some trouble dealing with the weather. He had a lousy game, 2 interceptions. He fumbled the ball 5 times, 2 of which were recovered by the Bills. They were down 14-0 really early, but when you're photographing sports is not only about action photography, but it's also about reaction photography. You're looking for the joy of victory and the agony of defeat, not just the players flying through the air. So I have a sequence of images after one of his fumbles of Eli coming off the field, and it was during one of the downpour, and he was just shielding his face from the rain, and he was obviously as miserable as the rest of us were. Now, it's impossible to keep the front element, the front piece of glass of the lens totally dry. The rain is coming in sideways. You're wiping it the best you can. I had some kind of a squeegee cloth, not a squeegee, but I forget what we call those things, but like a cloth that you could use on the lens. It wouldn't scratch the lens, but it was, you could wring it out, and I was doing the best I could to wipe the lens in between plays, but that cloth gets wet too. So there's really nothing you can do at some point. You're just trying to do the best you can, right? Once you have rain on that lens, on the front glass element, it's going to affect your pictures too. You're going to have this loss of contrast, and you're just trying to keep images in focus, and the rain's hitting your face. And so you can see in the sequence that, these images are really flat. There's not a lot of contrast, but I wasn't even really thinking about the content of the photographs. I'm just trying to keep things in focus and make as many pictures as I can. So, as I said, the Giants were down early, 14-0 in the first quarter. The defense did step up, and luckily for Eli, they also had a great running game. Brendan Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw had 3 touchdowns between the two of them. Funny thing about Bradshaw, because it was so wet, the decal on his helmet started to come off, and actually when he got hit on one play, the N in the New York NY actually got knocked off of his helmet, and he played the rest of the game with only a Y on his helmet, which I've never seen actually pieces of the decal on an NFL helmet actually come off. So that was pretty funny. The rain, unfortunately, did not stop. I was wearing multiple layers of rain gear, rain jackets, all that stuff. But the thing is, it rained so hard for so long that it just soaks through everything. I mean, I could feel the water against my skin, 3 layers deep, and there was just nothing you could do. We were just all soaking wet. That was bad enough as it is. But then something happened. The temperature started to drop. Now, I saw something in this game that I've never seen before and have never seen since. The rain is coming down. You look at the whole stadium, and there's just sheets of rain falling, right? And as the temperature drops, it starts to get colder, and then all of a sudden, in 1 second, all that rain just went poof, and it turned into snow. Like, it was insane. The whole crowd, the whole stadium, everybody went, whoa! Like, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I didn't think it happens that quickly like that, but it literally, from 1 second to the next, just went poof, and the rain became snow. The craziest thing. It dropped about 20 degrees in probably less than an hour. The thing is, we started to get really cold, and because we were so wet, all that water against our skin, you can feel the cold down to your bones, and there's literally nothing you can do. You have to stay out there on the field. You can't go in and dry off. You're covering the game. Sports Illustrated, I can't say, oh, sorry, I had to go in because I was cold, So it was bad. I've covered games in blizzards and sub-zero, temperatures. I've never been as cold as I was that day in Buffalo when it was 30 degrees. It was brutal. Now, of course, I'm grateful to have been working for Sports Illustrated. I was getting paid to be there, but it was bad. It was brutal. Even the players, what they do is they have these jet engines on the sidelines that blow hot air into the bench area, and players were huddling around it because just trying to get some warmth because they must have been as cold as we were. I remember at another time earlier in my career, those jet engines, my hand, I couldn't feel my fingers. I was wearing one of those big ski gloves over another layer, right, on the glove, a liner inside there, and I put my hand in front of one of those jet engines just to try to get some feeling back in my hands, like after the game was over and the players had gone, and it was so hot coming out of there that the plastic started to melt on those ski gloves. So, of course, I immediately took my hand out of there and shoved it into the snow, but that's how hot those things are, and the players are literally just huddled around it trying to stay warm. Unfortunately, the photographers, we had to tough it out, but that was all we could do, just complaining to each other about how cold it was. The Giants did go on to win the game 38-21. They finished the season 10-6, made it into playoffs as a wild card team, and actually went on to win the Super Bowl that season against the undefeated, until then, New England Patriots. The thing about that low contrast Eli photo when he was running off the field, When I bring it into the computer, in color, it doesn't really look like much, but if I make it black and white and pull out some of the detail using things like structure or clarity, depending on which program you use, I use Silver Effects Pro, and the structure setting does a really good job in pulling all those little details out. The rain really pops off the screen, and you can see the grimace in Eli's face. This is become one of my favorite images, and as miserable as I was that day, I'm thankful that I survived it and was there, because this picture, I've had this on my wall for years and years because it is just one of my favorite images. It's a storytelling picture, and it just looks cool in black and white with all that rain. So if you want to get a fine art print of this picture, you can absolutely do that at davidbergmanphoto.com. I'm selling 11 by 14 fine art prints for a limited time. I'm hand signing them, printing them on really nice gallery matte paper. So at 11 by 14, and you can also get pictures from some of the other episodes that I've talked about on this show. So again, that's all at davidbergmanphoto.com. I appreciate you joining me. I hope you liked that story. I hope that my pain brings some joy to your life, and by getting a print or just by hearing the story. So thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week with a new picture or set of pictures right here with a new episode from the vault.